30 projections in 30 days going into the 2024 regular season for the New York Mets as we continue our month-long deep dive into the Mets' 40-man roster. Today we are talking about the soft-tossing southpaw Jose Quintana. After signing a 2-year, $26 million contract with the Mets last offseason, Quintana's spring training was cut short last year as the veteran southpaw was in need of rib surgery, which sidelined him for the first 3 months of the 2023 season. Following his late July return, Quintana continued right where he left off with a stellar 3.57 earned run average, a 3.52 fielding independent pitching, striking out 18.8% of batters in 75.2 innings pitched. Quintana is a soft-tossing lefty who thrives on near-point command and control, making extra base hits and specifically home runs a very rare occasion. Low 90 sinker and a backspinning four-seam mix, slow-dropping curveball, a gyro-style changeup, and a sweeping action slurve hybrid pitch. As a plus contact manager, Quintana will be looking to provide more strong consistency from the back end of the Mets rotation, as he will be entering a 35-year-old season, set to become a free agent after 2024.
He's a solid pitcher. Is he amazing? No, but again, he's one of these guys, if he were a good team, he'd be your a quality four guy that can give you 180 innings. And feel confident about him. But no, with this team, he's going to be, especially now with the Senga injury, put at the number 1 or number 2, barring if you bank on an injury-prone former Yankee we'll get to later. A solid pitcher. I got nothing to complain about. He was as advertised last year. Let's see if he can duplicate it in a walk year.
Like I said all year, it was a weird situation that happened to me. It is obviously not a common injury, setback, whatever you want to call it, that you see. So for him to bounce back and still be solid, I thought there was a chance that maybe he got dealt at the deadline with the fire sale that the Mets were having with a lot of their veteran players. I thought that maybe Quintana would have been part of that. He's a guy that did get moved at the deadline last season. So I thought he would have been another, pretty good trade candidate. But when he was on the mound, he was solid again. Like Aaron said, nothing crazy, but he was pretty good. He's a guy that like we say with a lot of these pitchers, he keeps you in games. You know what I mean? Gives you the amount of innings that you want out of your starting pitcher. Once he came back, he stayed back. It wasn't like he came back, got hurt again, and what have you, because the year before, and even in the years prior, he had been very durable. This is a guy that a lot of times was giving you 32 starts. So for him to be kind of that Iron Man when not having surgery in this one instance, he's been a guy that's more times than not giving you those 30 starts. So for him this year, if there's no, weird situations, he's a guy that I do expect to be out there every 5 days, maybe 6 days, depending if they do that 6-man rotation. But again, I don't have crazy expectations for him, but I do expect him, like Andrew said, he's going to have to be at worst, a number 3 pitcher on this team. So unfortunately, that's just the kind of case that they're in right now with this roster, because when they had acquired him, he did have that expectation as a number 4, but with Verlander gone, with Scherzer gone, with Senga currently injured, that moves him up 3 spots in the starting rotation. So, there has been a lot of change in the Mets from when he was first signed, being that it was a 2-year deal, but now he's even more valuable to this team because they don't have those other guys. So it's a big year for him. And he's one of those guys that, we've talked about with a lot of these guys where now, if he does have another good year, well, he's a really big-time prime trade candidate because obviously last year he would have had another year on his deal. But since this year is a walk year, he's definitely another guy that if the Mets do struggle, but he has another okay season, he'd be a pretty, obvious trade candidate.
Yeah, and that's something that I think is very valuable with Jose Quintana, where he's been able to make starts, he's been able to give you a decent amount of sample, and I think that the Mets are going to be relying on that a lot more than people think they're going to. Obviously, with the injury to Kodai Senga, and that brings up the obvious follow-up question of how many innings you think he would actually have to pitch?
160? I mean, he hasn't hit 200 innings since 2016. But he's hit a few back-to-back with the Cubs, 170 through 4, 171. obviously with the Cardinals and the Pirates, he had 165. So that's kind of has to be, for me, what he has to get to. Because, again, with the uncertainty of the guys that are on the roster who are filling out the rest of the rotation now, especially with the Kodai Senga injury, he's the only guy who has a consistent track record of what he is. And you need him to be at least that to keep this boat floating. So he's the only guy who has the track record and the ability to just be that rock in the rotation. Is he an ace? No. Is he a number 2? No. Is he a 3 on a good team? No. But for us, he's kind of the only reliable starter in this rotation right now.
Pretty much an established statement of, with Quintana, we know what we're going to get. At his very best, we know what you're going to get in his very worst. I really think that he has a very high floor as compared to everybody in this rotation, and that's kind of how I've expressed it with these projections. Now, for those of you who do not know, projections are not predictions. They are benchmarks of a player's current specific percentile outcome based on predictive data and results. For my projections, I decided to go with, in my opinion, each player's 75th percentile outcome, although a majority of player projections are constructed from the player's 50th percentile outcome. I personally wanted to use a median between sustainability and upside. It also gives you a small hint as to who I am high on and who I am low on going into the 2024 season. I have him giving you 152 innings pitched, striking out 18.8% of batters, walking 8.3%, giving you a 4.20 earned run average, a 3.98 fielding independent pitching, a 0.9 home runs per 9, and a 1.2 wins above replacement.
We're looking for a minimum of 160 innings. He doesn't hit that in that projection, so that is kind of an issue for me. That either means that there was an injury or that he had some bad starts because he wasn't going as deep into games as he's supposed to. The only other positive
factor, right, Andrew? The
only positive factor is that if they do have a 6-man rotation, obviously there'd be less innings for him to have. So that's the only good 150 innings, in my opinion, is because they have the 6-man rotation. The one thing that does definitely track is the home run ball staying down. That's something he's done really well these past couple of years, staying under a home run per 9, which is also amazing for a starting pitcher. He even had a streak for a while that was just continuous of not giving up a home run spanning over 2 seasons. So I like all that. To see the ERA go up makes sense. He's going into 35, so that's just how baseball goes. He's been in the league. Like I said, I mean, there's a guy with the White Sox, 23 years old. So, I mean, what's this now? This is going to be his 13th year in the league. So, that's a lot. He's not a young 35. You know what I mean? Like, he did have that span where he had those 4 or 5 straight years of 200 innings with the White Sox. So this is a guy that, for him to all of a sudden be on the decline in age 35, that doesn't surprise me ultimately. I mean, if his ERA is in the mid 4s and he's going to have to be top end if Severino doesn't bounce back, Emanai doesn't bounce back, and Senga has some injuries, that's a rough year for the Mets. You know what I mean? So I hope it's better than that, but I could see the projection makes sense, unfortunately.
With his stuff that is kind of very hard to project because it's just very soft tossing. It's contact management. You never know how it's going to do because command is really hard to project because, it's not a fixable tool. So it's kind of very, very back and forth. I mean, I have him giving up 16 home runs this year, and there's a strong possibility where, with the, typical command that he has, you see that that could be an easy single digits this year. There's a strong possibility that could happen with how well he does
double
contact manage.
Total from a couple of years ago when he was fully healthy. So
that's where I have it. But again, like he has had a real consistent range where he is preventing the home run ball at a elite rate compared to like anybody in this league.
It's the benchmark of he didn't hit 160, and again, like you said, the contact manager and the home runs are a little high. And like Frank said, that'd be like a lot for especially him. And even with the 6-man rotation, him being that, again, the ace or the co-ace or whoever you want to say, and him being the prominent guy at the top of the rotation, if that's your best starter, I would expect him to be on a different team by the trade deadline. If this is supposed to be the top of the rotation, God knows what the rest of the rotation will look like.
You have a real wide range with projections. Obviously, you have Zips putting him at an even 100. You have Steamer putting him at 171 innings. You have Fangraphs putting him at 160. I mean, there is a different wide range, obviously, because it's really hard to predict a pitcher like this whose like stuff is very hard to project. But he's been able to get those results. It's going to happen. But obviously, with Senga going down, we're going to be relying on a piece like Jose Quintana, where we know what he is. We know what he is going to be year in and year out, start after start. And he's definitely going to be a very important piece to this rotation to kind of hold down the fort until the big guns, can actually be the big guns consistently in this rotation. And hopefully we do get that once again from Jose Quintana, who's been very consistent recently at the major league level.